Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. And today we are going to read a story about a hypocritical neighbor. This story comes from a Reddit user. My neighbor is a self-absorbed, condescending prick. My neighbor is a 63-year-old man who lives alone. He has no kids and his wife died 20 years ago. For all the years that I've known him, he's been friendly to us. Every time he sees me outside, he asks how I am and always has some kind words or some compliments for me and my wife. It's usually small talk and it's superficial but nice. Sometimes he would even come over to have coffee and chat for an hour or so. I never felt like he was trying to get something from us or anything because he was nice to the point of being a little weird. He would give us homemade cookies and things like that. When I saw him last, I asked him if he wanted to come over and watch the football game with us. He accepted and he came over, brought his beer, and watched the game with us. On that occasion, he told us that his doctor advised him to start taking care of himself and get out of the house more often since he spends almost all of his time alone. That's why he said he was starting to go to the gym and eat healthier. He was complaining that eating healthy wasn't cheap and that it was difficult for him to change his eating habits because he likes to eat meat and cheese. One day, my wife accidentally spilled coffee on her laptop, so she had to buy a new one. We didn't have enough savings at that moment to cover the purchase, so I borrowed the money from my mother. It was only $400, so it wasn't a big deal. When my neighbor found out, he said, "Oh, that's not good. Are you sure you should do that?" When I told him that we already paid back the loan, he just nodded his head and said, "I guess that's good." A few months later, I went to see him because he hadn't been around lately, and he was supposed to go to the gym with me that week. When I knocked on his door, he opened it, and right away he started yelling at me, saying that I knew he was sick and still invited him to go to the gym. I said that I did invite him, but he accepted and then changed his mind. He kept yelling at me and I got angry too. So I told him that I didn't want to hear any more excuses and that he better come to the gym tomorrow or else. He calmed down a bit after that and said that he'll think about it. I left him alone and went home. For some reason, I thought this would make him start coming to the gym again, but he didn't show up the next day and he hasn't been seen since. So my theory is that he really just wanted to hang out with us until he realized that we weren't useful anymore. So now I ignore him. One night we were having dinner with friends and they decided to stay over and sleep at our place. Since it was late and they were drunk, I offered them to sleep in the guest room while I and my wife slept in the living room on the couch. We were fine with that because the guest room is small and there isn't enough space for 2 queen-size mattresses. One of my friends snores really loud and I didn't want to wake up my wife. In the middle of the night, I heard someone banging on the front door and screaming, "Open the F up, I need to pee." Thinking it was my friend, I ignored him. The person kept knocking and screaming, so I got up to check. To my surprise, it was my neighbor. I opened the door and he pissed. "Can I use the bathroom?" "Please?" I told him that he could use the bathroom in the morning and he got pissed and screamed, "No, I gotta pee right now." I was getting annoyed by now, so I said, "Well, go ahead." He walked past me without saying a word and went to the bathroom. After he finished, I closed the bathroom door and tried to go back to sleep. Then I heard him say, "Hey, Op, can you drive me to the hospital?" Startled, I asked, "What happened?" He responded, "I don't know. I don't feel well. Can you drive me?" In a very rude tone, I told him that he woke me up twice in the middle of the night and that I wasn't driving him anywhere. He replied, "You're an asshole. I hope you get run over." With that, he opened the door and ran away. 5 minutes later, there was a loud crash, and my friends and I ran to the window to see what had happened. We saw my neighbor lying on the ground with his car on top of him. The neighbor's car had crashed into our mailbox and the telephone pole, and it was smoking. I immediately called 911 and I went downstairs. Our neighbor was lying on the ground unconscious and there was blood coming out of his mouth. The paramedics arrived first and they started performing mouth to nose resuscitation. After a few minutes, the police and my wife arrived. They put my neighbor on a stretcher and took him to the hospital. When the police officer approached me to ask what had happened, I honestly told him everything about my neighbor's behavior that night. When they were taking my neighbor away on the stretcher, he looked at me and said, I'm gonna kill you." My wife and I stayed at the hospital until 7 a.m. waiting for news. During that time, my wife received 3 calls from our neighbor's relatives asking about his condition. We told them that we didn't know anything and that they should contact the hospital. At 7 a.m., the doctor finally came out. He told us that our neighbor had suffered serious injuries and underwent surgery. He had a broken jaw, several broken ribs, a punctured lung, a ruptured spleen, a broken leg, and several cuts and bruises. He said that the prognosis was good, but that he would be in a coma for a few days. The doctor also said that they couldn't call his relatives yet because he was in critical condition and that they would probably wait until the next day. At that time, my wife received another call from her relative who was asking for an update. She told him everything the doctor told us and ended the call. When the sun started to rise, I took my wife home so she could rest before work. I went back to the hospital to keep watch. At noon, my wife called me to tell me that she was heading to the store to buy food for her parents. She said that she would be home in a couple of hours and asked if I wanted anything. I told her that I wanted some sandwiches and that she should bring one for herself. As soon as she hung up the phone, my neighbor's sister came running into the room crying. She asked me where my wife was, and I told her that she was out. She sat down on the chair in the corner and cried for a few minutes. Then she told me that she was going to wait for her brother to wake up. I agreed and left her alone. 1 hour later, my wife arrived with the sandwiches. She gave me one and sat down next to me. 5 minutes after she arrived, my neighbor's sister stopped crying and said, "Can you lend me $3,000? Confused, I asked, "Why would I lend you money?" "Because I need to pay for my brother's treatment." "Where is he?" "He's at home sleeping." "Why don't you ask your family for money? They're broke. Besides, it's none of their business. So lend me the money." I answered, "No way." "Why would I lend you money? You don't even know me." "Because you're a good person and you're not selfish like my brother. He used to lend me money all the time. He owed me $800 and he never paid me back. So I need you to lend me the money. I promise I'll pay you back. I have a credit card. Let me give you the details." I stood up and said, "No, I'm sorry, but I don't owe you or your brother any money. If you want money, ask someone else." She got up and said, "Great. Just wait until my brother wakes up and gets discharged. He'll definitely ask you to apologize for treating you like crap. Well, I can wait." She left the hospital and headed to my house. At 11 p.m., I received a call from the police station telling me that my neighbor was looking for me. I told them that he could come to my house, but they insisted on bringing him to the station. When I arrived at the station, I saw my neighbor sitting on a chair in the lobby. He was wearing a hospital gown and he had bandages on his jaw and his leg. His face was swollen and he had a tube coming out of his nose. He was breathing heavily through the tube. When he saw me, he screamed, "Up, let me out, let me out. I want to go home." I asked the officer if I could talk to him alone and they agreed. I went closer and said, "Let me guess. You want me to apologize to you?" The next day, I received a call from him at exactly 9 a.m. I told him that I didn't have the money, and that was the end of the call. He didn't call me again, but my wife received several calls from his sister asking for the money. She told her that I didn't have the money, and that was it. A few weeks later, my neighbor was fully recovered. He started visiting us again, bringing homemade cookies and wine. I was very surprised by that. I thought that he would hold a grudge against me for not lending him the money, but apparently he didn't care. I didn't mention the subject, and neither did he. So that's the hypocrite's neighbors. He demands respect from you when you want something, but he doesn't give it to you when you need it. Thank you for reading the story. And if you liked it, please leave a like and subscribe. See you in the next video.